Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are in the world. Welcome to this webinar entitled Discover Realized Language, an online tool for AAC. You'll see a couple of pictures there on the screen for you. I'm just going to mention two of them here. Paul Andres, sitting there in the middle, and I'm mentioning Paul because he won't be with us, but Paul was one of the original developers of this system, and so I always like to give him a bit of a shout out, but he's now living the life of retirement, so maybe I'll drag him in for a presentation at some point. And sitting behind the scenes over there on the right is my colleague Jane Odom, who is actually in charge of the AAC Language Lab, but she will be riding shotgun with me here. And during the session, if you have questions or queries, you'll see in a second, she's going to be trying to answer as many of those as she can. So let's whip on to the next slide. And your presenter here, my name is Russell Cross. I am a speech and language therapist, and I'm financially employed by Prenke Romich Company, which is a for-profit communication aid developer and provider. I have some non-financial claims here as the author of Unity and Word Core language programs, the Quad Profile, and the Realized Language System, and joint owner of several AAC-related patents. Alas, none of these actually provide any royalty payments. As I tell people, if you want to go into a field where you're going to make lots of money, AAC clearly isn't the one. I'm also a member of the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists in the UK, the American Speech Language Hearing Association, AISAC, and the Assistive Technology Industry Association's Research Committee. So those are my declarations before we start. But let's just take a look at a couple of housekeeping rules. The first one here is that if you lose the connection, or you have to leave or want to share this with a colleague, everyone registered with the webinar will receive an email tomorrow with a link to a recording. So you will find that if you have real problems, you keep losing the connection, don't worry too much about it. Just wander off and you will get an email tomorrow that will give you a link to recording, and that'll be available for at least 6 months, so you'll be good to go. This is one of the PRC Saltillo free courses, so we don't actually provide CEUs, although your email will work as a proof of attendance. But if you really must have a certificate, just send an email to support@realizedlanguage.com, and I will send you out a printable PDF. If during the presentation over the next 45 minutes you have any questions that you need answering urgently, type them into this little box. There's a box at the side of your screen here, and you can put in a question. You'll see where it says enter a question for the staff. If Jade is able to answer it immediately, she will do so. If not, we'll wait until the end. And it's the sort of question that probably everybody will benefit from. Jane will hold it back until later on. So feel free to ask questions during the session, and we'll get either back to you straight away with text, or we'll answer it later on in the presentation at the end. So really, what is this realized language stuff all about? Well, basically what happens here is we're going to collect data on an AAC device. We're then going to upload that data to the Realized Language website. And then we're going to use that data to create reports and do some analyses. And I'll show you what those sort of things look like during the presentation. You should bear in mind that there's both manual and automated uploading available. And what I mean by that is that you can set your device so that you can have uploads automatically every 24 hours if you have a Wi-Fi connection. Once that's in place, that'll automatically upload unless there's no new data or there isn't a Wi-Fi connection. If there isn't a Wi-Fi connection, don't worry. Your device will just wait until there is one and then upload at the earliest opportunity. But there's also ways that you can manually upload the data without using Wi-Fi. And some folks prefer not to use Wi-Fi or can't use Wi-Fi in certain situations. But there are ways of getting the data from the device onto a computer so that you can upload manually. That's true of some of the older PRC devices, and I'll mention that in a second. How you actually turn on and set the device for connecting to the Realize Language site will be coming to you tomorrow. And you'll have an email which will give you information for specific devices and apps. And to realize that the reason for that is that there are a number of different ways, and rather than spend 10-15 minutes going through each device, knowing that not everybody needs to know all of it, it's easy for me to send you this email which will contain some videos. So choose the device that you're using, click on the video link, and you'll get an explanation there how to specifically set up the link between your device and the Realize Language website. We talk about things being Realize ready, and this applies with PRC devices to things like the Accent, which is the current device. But if you've got the Echo or the Vantage or the Vanguard or even Pathfinder, some of the older devices, you can actually do data collection on them. That's still in there, even though we don't make them anymore. There is no Wi-Fi connection, but you can do the manual uploading, as I mentioned earlier. If you are using Saltillo devices, such as the NovaChat, the Chat Fusion, the VO, the Pro, the TouchChat Express, all of these have the facility to do data logging that you can use with the Realize Language site. And if you are using the iPad apps Words for Life or TouchChat, the iPad device will also allow you to do uploading via Wi-Fi on a 24-hour basis. So all of these different devices will allow you to collect and upload data. And as I say, tomorrow in your email, you get very specifics about each and every one of those. Now, I just want to show you this web page here. This is the scariest thing you're going to see. So if you're not running away after you've seen this, then you're good to go. It gets much easier. But it doesn't matter which device you are using when you're at the Realize Language website, all the analyses that you see will look the same. So the word clouds are the same, the word lists are the same, and all these features that you'll get will look the same. The only time there's a difference is when you go to something called the log page. And that's what I'm trying to show you here. And you'll see here there are 3 columns, and each of these is related to a specific device. So the first column here is what the log page will look like if you're using an Accent device. The second one is what you're using look like if you're using an iPad, and then the last one if you're using a Saltillo device. But that's the only place you'll see differences. And actually, you don't actually have to understand the logs in detail in order to make any distinction. But do be aware that if you're tracking different people with different devices, don't worry about it. The data will look the same except for one page, and you'll see that shortly. Okay, so that's the quick overview there. What I want to do now is to take you to the website itself, and let's explore it and see what the features are. And here we are at realizelanguage.com. This is where you go to start your journey with the system. There's a short video there if you want to take a look, but do be aware that you can explore a little bit if you haven't already done so. There's tabs about, there's information for professionals, parents, training, resources, FAQs, and support. So there is some information there that you can take a look at. But the only thing you need to do is to log yourself in, and you'll log in with a unique email and password after you've signed up for a Realize Language account. At the bottom of the page here, I just want to show you this thing. It says try it free for 30 days. So a Realize Language account will cost you $9.95 a year. So it's about $10 for a year. Before you sign up, I always recommend that you try the free 30 days, which is always a good idea. And even before you try the 30 days, I would recommend that you start collecting data for maybe a few weeks before you do it, because then when you start your 30-day free trial, you'll already have information to look at. And so that's much better than starting the 30-day trial, then starting to collect data. And it may take you a couple of weeks to get some good data and interesting data. So start collecting data, take out the free trial, and then after that, decide whether you want to continue with the 1-year subscription. With the 1-year subscription, you can track as many individuals as you like. So the subscription isn't per client, it's per account holder. So if I have an account, it's my account, and I can track as many clients as I like. So it's not per client, it's your account, and you pay $10 for your account and track whoever you like. So let's log in. I'm going to log into my training account here. I have an email and a password, and that just takes me in. If I am tracking just one person, this would take me straight to the home page of that one person. But if you're tracking multiple people, as you can see here, I'm tracking a whole bunch of accounts, then you'll come up here and you can now decide which person you want to look at. And I'm going to start by looking at my client called Jacob Test. So you click on the little button here that says the dashboard, and I click, and that's now going to take me to the overview page of the dashboard. So the overview is exactly what it says. It's just a quick look at your client data, and it's based on the latest week of information. Now you'll see on mine here that it says week ending July the 19th, 2014. So this is some very old data. But if we were tracking this client now real time, we'd be seeing data through to the end of this week. And you'll see that it starts on a Sunday, ends on a Saturday, and it starts filling in each day of data collected. And you'll probably see the current day or yesterday's, depending on how you're set up here. But this is an overview of the current week of data. Over on the left, you'll see this thing here called a widget, which gives me information about words. In terms of this one, it shows me a little word cloud. And you'll see here it's looking at the words for this week. There's a little graph here of use, so it gives me an idea of how much time the device is being used. It's a bit of a broad measure here. And then at the bottom, it gives me a little analysis of the words being used this week. And you'll see here there's a lot of nouns and then verbs and adjectives. And it breaks the words down by part of speech. Certainly, speech pathologists are usually very interested in this stuff. Other folks, maybe not so much, but it's there. So this is an overview of the current week. And if I just go up to the top here, over on the right, next to where you see these dates, there's a little tiny button here called Generate Report. So I'm going to click on that one. And it says sending data on screen, report generation complete. It may be so fast you didn't see it, but something has just happened. And we'll come back a little later to see what exactly has happened there. You'll also notice that along the top right, we have some little tabs for overview, use, words, log, analysis, and reports. And we can tab through all of those and get other information or more detailed analysis. Otherwise, I can also use some of these buttons at the side, because not only do they have data, but they will take me somewhere. So I'm going to start by pressing on this thing called words, and I can either press the big widget here, and I click, or I could have pressed the one at the top here. Either will get me in. And now we're on a different page where you'll see we have 4 new buttons down the side. And here we have the word cloud. The word cloud, if I click the button where it says cloud, it's just going to keep jumping around and it'll change. And what it's really showing me are all the words that my client has used in a particular time period. Big words mean they've been used a lot, little words, not so much. And the other thing you just need to be aware of is at the top right here, It's this little date range, because remember what I said, on the home page, you're seeing an overview of this week. It's a quick snapshot of this week. But once you leave the home page, you can actually look at huge data sets. And now I'm looking at the data between July the 5th and July 15th. And at any time, I can go in here and click, and I have a drop down that allows me to change the dates. So this is where you might find yourself wanting to say, hey, it's interesting looking at July the 5th to the 15th on 2014. I wonder what it was like the same week, same 2 weeks in 2013. So this is where you can go in and change the dates, date range of your information. And that's very useful when you start doing comparisons at some point to see what they've been doing at different times throughout a year. So be aware of that. This is where you change dates, and we're now looking at the data from these 2 weeks. The top 10 button, very, very easy. And as you can see, it just gives me the top 10 words that my client has used. I, too, drink, want, yogurt, no, at, yellow, on, star. And if you look at that, and you've been working with clients for some time, you'll realize that some of these are very high frequency words that are used a lot and very common, like I and to and drink and want and at and on. But words like yogurt and yellow and star are typically not used as much. But for this client, they're obviously very important. And we can go and take a look shortly at where those are being used and how they're being used. But the top 10 is exactly what it is. It just gives you a quick look at the most frequently used words. One thing I just want to go back and show you here is another example. When we have the word cloud here, with the word cloud, I can go up to this report generating button, and I can click here. And you'll see I get this option to do either a full report or a snapshot. And what I'm going to do here is take a snapshot. And I click, and something happens. Report is generated, and we'll come back later to see what exactly happened there. The A to Z is another useful feature where I can now see all the words that my client has used in this time period. So I scroll down here, you'll see we go from the word A down to the word zip. And so you'll see this is basically a count of all the different words my client has done. And a little tip here that sometimes is worth bearing in mind. If I click on the screen and I hold down my mouse button, so I've clicked and I'm holding down the mouse button, and then I go down to here and then let go of the mouse button and then do a copy or Control C, I can copy all that information there and put it somewhere else. So if I open up here, Word document, so you'll see it's just a plain document, I'm going to paste in the words. And you can see here now that I could actually use this to keep a record of my client vocabulary at that time date. So I could pop at the top of here a date and say client vocabulary as of this date is here. But the other thing I just want to point out with Microsoft Word and some other word processors is that if you do that and you look right down in the very bottom of Microsoft Word, it actually tells me how many words I've got there. So if you're trying to collect data and numbers, this is a quick way of getting hold of my client's expressive vocabulary count. I now know my client now has demonstrated an expressive vocabulary here of 513 different words. And if you want to collect numbers, this is a really quick way of doing it. So bear that in mind, that at any time with some of the data that's in here, you can always copy any of this data and put it somewhere else. Lists is another important feature here. And this is where people find themselves a lot of the time looking at the words and seeing how these words are all chopped up. And you can look at different aspects of the vocabulary here. And you'll see here that you can see the word known and pre-stored are highlighted, unknown and spelled are grayed out. So let me just spend a couple of minutes just to explain what these things are. Known words are words that the website recognizes as real English words. So the website itself has a dictionary and it can recognize over 100,000 English words. And so if it sees one of those words when you've pressed the known button, it'll pop up here. So these are all words that are real English words. Pre-stored means that these are words that have been stored in the device as an entire unit. So these are the words that you've stored on buttons somewhere or in sequences. So you press the button of a picture of an orange and up pops the word orange on the text bar. So these are pre-stored and known words. However, if I just toggle here, I'm going to click on this and it'll toggle now to unknown. It's now showing me words that are pre-stored. Somebody's put them in the device, but they are unknown. And what unknown means is the dictionary doesn't recognize them. And the words that we don't have in the dictionary are what I call the 3 Ps: people, places, and products. And so we don't keep a list of the names of, the names of all the words for people in the world. We don't have all the products in the world. We don't have places in the world. So they will show up here in unknown. So this is where you'll find things like Walmart, Beethoven, Mars, and Venus. So these are, again, typically names of people, places, and products. However, if you want to just include them, notice now I can show you both known and unknown words. So all those words that were in there will now be showing, like Washington is now included in this list here. And once again, if I want, I can take these lists, I can copy them, I shan't do it, and paste them into a document. In fact, if I paste them into things like a spreadsheet, then we can do some interesting things with the numbers, but that's for another training. So that's the difference between known and unknown. And pre-stored and spelled is probably very obvious. If I toggle now to the spelled, now you're seeing all the words that my client here has spelled out letter by letter. And you'll see here, for example, that they spelled out the word lab, L-A-B, 8 times, and the word on was spelled 8 times as well. The value of this is, number one, you can see where your client is actually using spelling, which can be interesting if you're working on literacy, but it can give you a bit of a hint as to whether there are words you need to add, because if a client is spelling a word that isn't pre-stored, then you might say, oh, maybe I should add this. But also, it'll also show you where your client are spelling words, maybe they don't need to. So my example here is the word on. And so to spell that, they're going to have to hit a button called spell, then an O and an N and a space, and then maybe that'll automatically take them back. But that's 4 keystrokes. The word on my client's device, I know happens to be a single hit button on the home page. So I would just go back and say, hey, let me just remind you here that you can get the word on by pressing this button. And I would do the same with the word the, because the word the is spelled 3 times here. And I'm thinking, oh, let me show you where that word is. So this is a way that you can improve your client's performance by showing them other ways that they could access things that they will previously be spelling. And just for completion, because I know sometimes people are curious, what are unknown spelled words? What do they look like? Certainly we'll still have names like Antonio, but also we'll get here a lot of misspellings. And the interesting thing about misspellings is sometimes even that can give you information. So you'll see here, I have the word scarch, S-C-A-R-C-H. So my client has done the word scarch. They also have the word scatch, S-C-A-T-C-H, and the word scratch, S-C-R-A-C-H. And if you look at those 3 together, you'll probably say, oh, I think they're trying to get the word scratch. So here we have information about their attempts at spelling, and then we can go back and say, hey, let's take a look at some of these blends and see how they work, because here we've got SCR is a blend and TCH a blends. We can go back and focus on some of those blends and say what's happening there. Equally, we might find things like examples where I have Vivaldi here with 2 V's. I have Antonio here, but with 2 N's. I also have tune, as in a cartoon, with 3 O's instead of 2. And there are a number of situations in here where we'll find that there are letters are being repeated, like the word hi here is I. And what that might suggest is that maybe my client is double hitting some of these buttons. Same with York there, double Y. And so it might be that the access speed on the button that they are selecting is a little too fast. Maybe we need to slow it down a bit to cut down on some errors. Now, I don't know if that's true, but what I want you to take away is the fact that when you look at this data like that, it gives you some clues as to what you might want to go and investigate. So you can get information about what's happening and then make some guesses about why things might be happening. So typically, known and pre-stored is where people find themselves looking, but this is where you can explore your client's vocabulary in quite a bit of detail. I'm going to switch over here to the section called analysis, because I think this is also another area people find themselves looking. And here you'll find there are 3 widgets. There's parts of speech, word groups, and manage goals. And the parts of speech is an interesting one because it does break down your vocabulary and gives you some information about the spread of that vocabulary. And I'm just going to click on here and do this thing called the snapshot again, and we'll come back to it. But here's a way to track what are the predominant types of words being used here. And we'll see this is very nouny vocabulary, I would say. Here's a client who uses a lot of nouns in their vocabulary. And we'll take a quick look at somebody later who's less nouny, and you can make comparisons. But the 2 buttons here for word groups and manage goals are useful if you want to do some tracking. So I'm going to click on this button called manage goals. And you'll see here that there's a list, and it's called the default list, and it's a default list of vocabulary. And there are 400 words on here, many of which are core words, but it's a mix of core words and less frequent words. And this is a list that was developed by a colleague called Gail van Tatenhove, and some of you are probably very familiar with Gail in the world of ASC. But Gail has created this list and has used this list pragmatically for many years with her clients. And she's always felt that if a client can learn these 400 words, then they can do an awful lot of communicating. So you have this set of 400 words as a set of goals. And if I now press on the button called Word Groups, what that does is it now shows me my client vocabulary. Remember those 513 words? It's showing my client vocabulary matched against that target set. So you'll see here, there's a lot of words. These are all the Gail's 400 words. And you'll see of those which ones my client has done, like cold and clean and could and drink, and which ones my client hasn't demonstrated. So across or above or again or although. And you'll also see it split up by part of speech. And if I just want to, for example, say, how are they doing with pronouns? I can click on the pronoun button and you'll now see that I've got I, everybody, everyone, something, there, they, who, you. So it gives me a look at a particular set of word types. And I'm going to click on my snapshot button one more time. And we can do the same for, say, adjectives here. And then we can go back to all of them. So this is a way that you can track a vocabulary that you're targeting using this managed goals section. Unsurprisingly, if I press this button here called new target list, I can now add any list I like. Doesn't matter what list, I can create this. And this is the one whereby if you're working with a client and you have an IEP and you identify target vocabulary for the next period of time, you can put it in here and then you can start tracking how well your client is against that list. And then once you've added lists, they will pop up in here. So you'll see in here, I have a number of lists that I've created over time by adding them in. So for example, this one here is called the PRC 100. This is a list put together by a couple of my colleagues for 100 high frequency, very useful words. And now Now that's been selected, I can go to word groups, and now we're going to see how my client is doing against that vocabulary list. If I look at pronouns, they've actually got everything on that except for the word mind. So what am I going to do next session? Well, gosh, what a surprise. I'm going to set it up so that we can try and encourage my client to use the word mind so that I can see whether they're able to access that word and then use it. And same with prepositions. I've got everything on that list except under. So you can choose the list you want to use. Here's a Dolch primer. You'll see here, now we're looking at them against a different list. So you can add new lists, and you can go back to lists that you have previously created. And the word groups and the manage goals work together to give you information for seeing how people are performing against a set of targets over time. Now that's tracking vocabulary, but what else might you want to take a look at or get some information about? Well, we've talked about words, looking at vocabulary. We're looking at this as giving us parts of speech, but it'd be interesting to get some information about how people are using words in sentences. So this is where we can go to this thing called the log page. And I've clicked on the word log, and just a reminder, this is what the log looks like with this client, and this client is using a PRC accent, but we can change how the log looks. It comes up automatically in what's called this graphic layout here. And you can probably make out already things that are happening. So I'll just step through and show you in a second in more detail. But there's a button called Hide Details, which means you can actually get down to this sort of level where all you're basically seeing is spelling and words. And that's usually a nice, clear, clean way to look at what's happening. Or we can go to the level here, which is called the full layout. So you see these little 3 buttons here? This changes how things look. So I'm going to go to the thing called the full layout, and I'm going to press the button called Show Details. And now you can see it looks really quite complex. You know, there's a lot of stuff in there, but you can choose how much detail you want to see. I typically have mine set, so I've got this set for the full layout, and I've hidden some of the details because what I can see here is enough to give me information about what's happening. So let me just step through what's happening with the data here, and you can probably guess it. So little code at the beginning, SPE, that means spell, not a surprise. And then a time, 6:51 and 10 seconds. So this is very early in the morning. And what's my client doing? Well, they did MONSER space. And then they stopped. And then they said MONS. And then you'll see how this has changed. And instead of seeing SPE, it says WPR. And depending on your screen, you may or may not be able to work that out. It's in yellow, so it's not very clear. But what they've done there is used word prediction. So they've spelled MONS and seen the word monster up on their display in their word prediction window, and they've selected it. So this is where you can see, again, it happens here. Look at that one, MONS, word prediction, monsters, INC space, and then DVD player, sad. Word kitten. And now you're seeing here words with the things like act, just tells me it's from an activity row, and that's a PRC thing. SEM means that it's using a semantic compaction, but it just means it's in a sequence. And you'll see here that this is as much information as I need, because I can now see things like here. That's how I've got turn it off TV. Now, that might be a sentence, or it might be just turn it off, might be the sentence. But what's interesting is you can go through here and find these things yourself. You can look at them and discover. So if it's turn it off, then of course, you know, I would then keep that as a 3-word sentence. And we can start looking. Let me take that rabbit here. See, I've made it much simpler. we can start looking for examples of sentences and how people are using their device in a sequence. If I want to change the day, I just go over to the side here and I can click like that. Oh, back to class. There's another one. I want to read Frog and Toad. I want to go home at 1:30. There's a nice little one there. Look at that. I want to go home at 1:30. So the website itself is not good at recognizing the sentence. There isn't a special button on here that I can press and it will say, show me sentences. It recognizes words, but the computer isn't smart enough to work those out. But you can do that, and that's why you would want to go into the log. Typically, you go into the log to try and find these examples of sentences, and then you can do things like look at average length of a sentence, etc. But the log is where you find that detail there. The other thing you'll find in the log, which is useful, is you can see when things are happening. What's a busy day versus a quiet day. So I can step back here. We'll see here Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, pretty much an early start, 10 o'clock. Tuesday, a bit of a quiet day, not much happening till the afternoon. Friday, very quiet day, nothing happening there. And these are just periods when nothing is being logged. And that might be because the client doesn't have the device. The logging has been turned off. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why. But the purpose of looking at things like this is, I always say to people, this is where you will find opportunities. So if we look here, for example, on Tuesday, between 8 o'clock and 1:30, there's not a lot happening. Now, I don't know what's going on here, but I bet if I were to talk with the team who are working with this client, they'd probably come up with some ideas, say, oh, well, actually, this is the day when we go to the swimming pool and my client's swimming, so they're not going to be using their device, which is brilliant. Or you could say, my client doesn't use a lot here because X, Y, and Z. But we could say, well, is there any opportunity for increasing the use of the device in these sessions? So for me, the way to look at this is to see this as, not just a where am I talking, but where could I be talking? Oh, on the other little bit of data. It's a chart full of opportunities. So we can also look month by month. And I'm going to show you here. So you can see here and there, I'm looking at July. And if I step back, I'm going to step back just a little further because what I want to show you here is that if I step back far enough, oh, maybe it's not this far. I was going to say if there's data further back, you'll see it. I may not have it on this demo here. Okay, but the log section here is where you will go to find primarily what's happening at what time, and if you want to find out information very specifically about sentence building, here's a good place to start. Now, I also want to go, after all that, I want to take you back to the reports section, because remember what we're doing. I kept clicking on the generate report thing, saying something happened. Well, here's what happened. The first thing at the bottom of my list here, at 12, 14, and 27 seconds today, I generated a report called Overview. So what I'm going to do is press this button called View. And if I press View, what it's going to do on my computer here, because this is how I've got to my desktop. So what it's going to do is it's going to open up a little window here to allow me to save this on my desktop. Now, depending on how you set up your browser, it might be different. So if I were using a different browser, this might actually open up the PDF automatically in a different window of my browser. So it always varies a little bit, but what it should give you somewhere is the ability to then see this report. So I'm going to press save. So what it's now done is it's taken that report, it's saved it to my desktop, and now if I click, it's going to open it, and there we go. So here I have a hard copy of that first day. Remember when we looked, first week, We did the overview, tells me the time, week ending 2014, and now I have that available to me as a PDF that I can print out and share with folks. But I also have it here as a online record that'll stay for as long as I want. If I look at the cloud, a little similar, but I'm going to press the view. So what's it going to do? On mine, it just says, okay, first of all, where do you want to save it? So I'm going to let it save it. And then I can go and open that. So let's open that. And what it's going to do is it's going to go to my default. Oh, here we go. There we go. Graphics program. So it's now opened this up in Microsoft Photos. I'll just make it bigger so you can see it. So that was the snapshot we took. And of course, if I now press the button for print, I shan't do it, but you'll see here. So this is now going to let me print this out on a piece of paper. And I will now close that. I don't want to. But it's surprising, or maybe not surprising, how useful this can be to get this word chart. I know that in our beta testing days, we had one parent who was using this, who found this very, very useful, because she could print this out and then take it to the IEP meeting, show this to everybody there, the teachers, the teaching assistants, the speech pathologists, and everybody involved with their client, and everybody can look at this and sort of understand it. This is not a statistical chart in Excel. It doesn't have graphs or anything. It's just a pictorial representation of words and the frequency. So the cloud is actually very good to share with people, to give a view of the vocabulary. And it's also a very good way of making wonderful refrigerator art that your client can then take home or share with grandparents. I'm a grandparent. My grandkids share all sorts of stuff with me, and bang, it goes on the refrigerator. Of course it does. So this is a way of having your client get involved in being able to create these things. So that's another one. And just for completeness, let's just have a look at the parts of speech so you can see it. This is the one, remember, I took that little snapshot. And here we can see that it's just showing me here the parts of speech chart. So that was the one that we took. And then finally, the word groups here was when I looked at the specific part of speech. And open that one up. And you'll see here that we're looking at the, so this is giving me the pronouns. The other thing to bear in mind is that if you slide that away a little bit, you might have noticed that all these files end in this little dot with a PNG. And what that means is they're being saved as graphic files. They're actually special picture files. And the reason that we did that is because those files are pretty portable. You can take them and stick them into other things. So if I were to, look at this thing, I'm looking at the page here. If I copy it, so I'm just going to copy this picture. And remember, if I go here, I'm just going to open up here, and I'm going to do paste. I can now drop that into a document. And I can create custom documents. So I can now put this in here and call that pronouns, and then give it a date, blah, 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 and build customized reports myself. So that's the reason why you'll find these things are in PNG. It's because they are able to be then copied and pasted anywhere. Also, if you're using a Mac or a PC, or even if you're using a Chromebook, these formats can cross anywhere. So that's where the analyses, the reports will all sit for you. And so I just want to give you one more look here, just at a different client, because what you've seen there are sort of the main things people do with this, and there's other things you can do, but these are sort of the critical things that people are typically looking for. I just want you to take a look at another client data set. And this is my client called Betty Beta. And this is an example of a client who you would say was maybe a little more communicative. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the words again here, and I'm going to go for the top 10. And I just want you to see this top 10 because it's a little different, but you'll see things are similar. I to this is, I to the is, I'm, and it, word, this. Now, all those, the only word that strikes me as being not typically top 10 would be word, but the rest are pretty much core type vocabulary. If I then look at the lists, you know, we see that top 10, but you start looking down the rest of the list after word this, we have be, on, its, don't, have, working, in, not, that, go, my, time, see, if. All of these are very high frequency core type words. So I think what we're looking at here, just basically glancing through the data, is we have a client who's using a lot of core vocabulary. And if we look at spelling, it's actually using less spelling than my previous client. So you'll see here that words like prediction, phrase, random. But if we toggle back to the pre-stored, that's probably because my client is using a lot more pre-stored vocabulary here. If we then have a look at the analysis, I want you to take a quick glance here at this parts of speech. This is almost flipped from my previous client where we had nouns at the top and then verbs, but look how many verbs, look how verby this thing is. And that is probably more typical of a mature communicator. And when you think about it, verbs include things like the is, be, have, do. All those helper verbs are in there as well, and we use those an awful lot. And then you see how nouns and pronouns actually sort of almost balancing out. And again, we'll find that with mature communicators, we do use an awful lot of pronouns. We use nouns, and if you were to record what I'm saying now and then go back afterwards and take a look at it, you'll find that I've used some nouns in there, but a lot of what I am saying now is made up of pronouns and verbs. So you'll see that this just gives us information about a different style of communicating. We're seeing here a more mature communicator. And then if we were to look at the manage goals and see how they're doing here, again, what's interesting is we look at the data and we say, well, for a mature communicator, we're not actually getting, you know, they're not hitting all the 400 words. But do remember, this is expressive vocabulary. We were looking at what my client was doing, not what they know, but what they've demonstrated. And the other thing you always need to check out is if I go to the log, and if I just go to the month, I want you to see this here. This sample is very different from my other clients because this one actually, you'll see as I click back here. Okay, it's not as big a sample. It really isn't. It's a much smaller sample. Sort of a lot in April, but then it shrinks off. So the size of your sample is there. So always be aware of whether you've got the size of your sample as well when you're looking at the data. This is not something you have this on all the time, but they will be turning this off at various periods. Then if we have I'm going to hide the details. Here we go. Here's some examples of what they were doing. I must see if I can spell. I imagine that Certi will be seeing, but I could be wrong. So you can see that this is a very different set of data here, and the sentences that are being produced. Click somewhere else. Been working with Paul. I wonder why some Unity sequence are not shown. That's some test data. So I just wanted you to see that data, so you've seen a comparison there of what you might call a mature communicator versus a less mature communicator. And you can look at some data where the data is actually just lists and lists of nouns. But what I do want you to be aware of it is that it really doesn't matter what device you're using, it doesn't matter what program. When you look at the data across the devices, you'll see how there everything is pretty much common. Doesn't matter what the device is there. Okay, I shall stop there. It is 12:51 Eastern Standard Time, and we have 9 minutes, so I wanted to leave a little bit of time here. I do want to just add one more thing here, which is something called the non-marketing marketing phrase. And it's called that because I was told by the marketing department it was too big to go on a t-shirt. And the non-marketing marketing phrase that we use here is that realized language doesn't give you all the answers, but it helps you ask better questions. And that's certainly what we found out in the field since we developed this, is that the real value of this system comes in when you have a team, and that the team can all share the data, and that they can get together and talk about it. And they ask questions. They look at the data and they say, well, I wonder why this happened, or I wonder why this didn't happen, or I wonder why they said this and not that. And so getting a team together means that you can maximize this data and have more eyes looking at it. And certainly, if you look at the data and it makes you ask more questions, that's a good thing. Asking questions is always a good thing. So realized language doesn't give you all the answers. It just helps you ask better questions.